Okay, so I am really excited to introduce Ashley Guberman to you guys. She runs Primary Goals. She's a professional copywriter and business coach with certifications in Story, Brand, Infusionsoft, and Digital Marketer. She also has a master's in behavioral science, specializing in coaching and consulting with organizations. And she's worked with the Institute for Generative Leadership for 3 years. And for fun, she jumps off mountains in a paraglider and raises grade school twins and writes web software. And this is so cool. Her biggest project was writing the analytics that drove the Wounded Warrior Project from spending $5K a month in advertising to over $5 million a month. And the project was based on demonstrating positive results while under the constraints of government regulations for nonprofit organizations. Really cool, and what a great organization. So with that, I will let Ashley take it away, and I'm going to disappear for a little bit, but happy to come back if you need me. I'll just be in the background.
Thank you. So there will be some slides that will help if you wanted to go ahead and text the CFA to that number there. It's not strictly speaking required. I invite you to do so if you wish. Okay. So I don't know about you, but I've seen more project breakdowns than I can count. Each one of them is like a slow motion train wreck, and chances are you've seen your share of breakdowns as well. Breakdowns are a massive problem, costing enormous amounts of money to deal with, and even the best project management, they're not going away. It turns out there's actually a way of looking at communication where every single breakdown makes sense. Yes, every single one. Looking at communication in this way, it won't eliminate breakdowns, but it will make them visible earlier, reduce their impact, and give you the tools that you need to recover faster. I'm going to present a framework called Conversations for Action, but it would be a mistake to think that it's just an academic model. It's more like gravity, in that whether you believe in it or not, it still holds your feet to the ground. Now, gravity existed long before Isaac Newton's formula to describe it. But because he looked at a common experience through new eyes and understanding, we now have everything from calculus to the space program. I'm inviting you to look at conversations in a new way so that you can produce new results. With the right conversations, you can completely shift the way that you work with clients, subordinates, or superiors, and produce drastically better results by any measure. Conversations shift results. That's what I want you to be thinking about as we continue. So what's at stake? Why is this worth your time and attention? Learn this way of looking at communication, and you get to be the hero who reduces breakdowns, satisfies customers, and maybe even gets the promotion. Ignore it, and you can expect more breakdowns, frustrations, and train wrecks. So my name is Ashley Guberman. I run Primary Goals marketing and coaching company. I'm a professional copywriter, business coach with certifications in Story, Brand, Infusionsoft, Digital Marketer, bachelor's in psychology, master's in behavioral science, specializing in coaching and consulting in organizations. The good news about Conversations for Action is that it will work for you whether you're the boss, subordinate, customer, or client. If you're an executive or senior leader with too many inputs from all directions, then your ability to communicate your needs and get agreement on who will do what by when is essential to your success. If you're a middle manager being pulled from multiple directions, then your ability to have effective conversations to different audiences is essential for your success. And if you're an individual contributor, then your ability, well, I see things aren't lining up here. Let's go there. Okay. And if you're an individual contributor, then your ability to differentiate between requests and observations, to extract requests from complaints, will let you deliver more effectively to those with the power to reward or promote your career. The point is that this is relevant at all levels of an organization. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to start with the anatomy of action. It's about the gap between what we care about and the results that we get. Then we're going to go over agreements. Agreements are something that we all know what they are, but that's actually a far cry from being skillful at creating them, or more importantly, having them satisfied. Lastly, we'll get into the core conversations for action framework. So let's start with the anatomy of action. Companies, organizations, managers, we all want results. The particulars may vary by organization, but any company that does not deliver on results that matter, it's not going to survive very long. The only way to get those results is by one or more people taking action. Even modern keyboard jockeys are still taking action, even if it's through the direct application of knowledge and skill acting upon data through code. The action part is important. Even the Dalai Lama said, it's not enough to be compassionate. You must act. Likewise, it's not enough to simply want a result. Somebody has to act. Next, there are more demands placed upon us than we can ever fully address. And the rate of change today implies that the demands are more likely to increase than decrease. Therefore, what matters regarding the various actions that we could possibly take are the ones that we're actually committed to. And while some of our commitments are intrinsically motivated, with any group or team, those commitments are generated through conversation. And of course, the things that we talk about are byproduct of what we care about, our concerns. These are the things that matter to us. Unfortunately, in all too many contexts, here's what it really looks like. We have the things that we care about and that we expect or that are demanded of us, and we're supposed to deliver results. Those three pieces in the middle, conversations, commitment, and action, are glossed over. And then we wonder why we have a huge gap between what we want and what we get. We need to pay attention to all of the parts above to generate effective action driven by commitments that are clarified through conversations to deliver on what we care about. So part of that is, let's take a quick look at unspoken requests. Okay. Think about something that a complaint that you have within your work environment. One of the assumptions of conversations for action is that every complaint has within it a hidden or not so hidden request. If somebody is complaining, then they are expressing a desire to close a gap between what they want and what they experience. Even something as simple as, it's too hot in here, is probably a request that they want to feel cooler. But merely making a request is not enough. Requests need to be made of somebody with the ability to act upon them and spoken to generate a commitment to act, even if the answer is no. No is a commitment. It's a commitment not to act. So every request that doesn't end in agreement ends up in increasing unmet expectations. Unmet expectations are a significant source of frustration, resentment, discouragement. Sarah Vowell once said that expectations are resentments that are still under construction. So it's important to voice our complaints, but to do so in the form of concrete requests. Even if the answer is no, an agreement not to act is better than an ambiguous non-agreement, because the former can at least reset expectations appropriately, and it can open up the possibility to look for alternatives. As leaders, no one wants to listen to complaints. A skillful leader, you can help people translate their complaints into clear requests through the conversation for action framework, and then move them through to action, to agreement, and results. So what is an agreement? Unfortunately, the term is used in different ways. In one context, an agreement represents what's true, such as the sky is blue. Well, except here in Seattle, where I am, where there was a standardized test that had to count gray as an acceptable answer because so many school kids got it wrong. In another context, agreements represent contractual obligations, such as something written with a legal document. In yet another, they represent a shared view within a community, such as it's cold outside or global warming is real. In the context of conversations for action, agreements serve as the foundation upon which we generate the actions that lead to the results that we care about. So within the conversation for action framework, agreements consist of 5 distinct components. The first component is that there is a clearly identified speaker or customer with a request, and somebody who hears that request. That's the performer who's able to respond to that request. The first shift in your conversation needs to be from the macro to the micro. We think that the customer is the client, and as the agency or business, we're the performer. Or maybe your boss is the customer and workers on the front line are the performers. That's too macro. At the micro level, it's far simpler and more effective. If I say, please pass the salt, that's a request. When you give it to me, you're the performer. So if you're building a website and ask the client for images, you are the customer for the request, and they are the performer. When they ask for a status update, it's the other way around. This is actually the first shift I invite you to make to produce better results. In this context, customer and performer are not roles in an organization. They're parts of a conversation. The second component of conversations for action is the conditions of satisfaction. In software, engineering, web design, these are the acceptance criteria. In HR, they're the measurable and stated levels of achievement. Interpersonally, this is what leads to effective conversation that supports building trust, or ineffective ones that destroy it. For an example of why this matters, think of a time when maybe, as a manager, you needed to discipline an employee who is not meeting expectations. If you've ever done that, then perhaps you've been on the receiving end of such an action, or can at least use it as a reference point. One reason that HR steps in and wants so much documentation of the process is to ensure that you're both working from the same conditions of satisfaction. If you think an employee is falling short, and they think that they're fully meeting expectations, the gap is that the conditions of satisfaction are not clear. For a lighter example, I can recall my parents telling me that I needed to clean my room, to which I take everything on the floor and just stuff it under my bed. In my mind, I completed their request. They, on the other hand, weren't satisfied, and we argued all through adolescence. What was missing is that we didn't have an agreement on the conditions of satisfaction. Conditions of satisfaction encompass various aspects of role clarity, ongoing communication, levels of quality, and timeliness of deliverables. Okay. So that last part, timeliness, is actually important enough to merit its own component within conversations for action. Essentially, this is the by-when of a request or agreement. As an exercise, as you're listening to various requests that are made of you throughout the day, pay attention to how often by when is really spoken and when it's implied. Then there's my personal favorite, by when, which is as soon as possible. What does that really mean? As soon as possible for whom? With what assumptions? The thing about as soon as possible is that while it may be intended to communicate urgency, all too often, it fails to recognize that all requests arrive within a context of the requests and commitments that came before. I'm not denying that, that ASAP is real. Effective conversations, however, simply require that ASAP requests be placed in the context of other existing agreements. Failing to do so ends up leading to avoidance, denial, or minimization of existing agreements. So does that mean that every single request needs to go through a drawn-out conversation process and reprioritization of all pending requests and commitments? No, of course not. Because the components of conversation for action, one of the components is a shared background of what's obvious. So think back to the last time you joined a new organization, or the last time a new employee joined yours. In the beginning, there was a significant ramp up time. Things that could be explained in a few sentences among old-timers required far more context and explanation for the uninitiated. The difference between the high and low context conversation is based on the need to create a shared background of what's obvious. The reason this is so important is that one of the sources of failed agreements is when the two sides are operating with a non-shared view of what's obvious. In some cases, they may even be operating with opposing views of what's obvious. Many cultural clashes, for example, can be traced back to different contexts for what's obvious, such as norms regarding how people are supposed to interact with each other, or roles and responsibilities in the context of differing levels of authority. If you're familiar with Crucial Conversations model by Patterson, then the shared background of obvious maps directly to what they call the pool of shared understanding. It's the responsibility of all participants and leaders to add to that pool and foster an environment where everybody is actually aligned on what's most important. The things that the leaders assert, this should be obvious, actually, leaders don't make that assumption. They ensure that everybody comes to know what is most important and that they keep it at the forefront of action. Contrary to the shared background of what's obvious, the last component of conversations for action is about making the why of a request explicit. It's about making the non-obvious more obvious. The for the sake of what is about communicating the force or power of the request and putting it into whatever larger or more immediate context is driving the request. In some organizational cultures, when a request comes in from a superior, one doesn't ask why. The military cliche about being asked to jump, where the response is not why, but how high. The irony about that example is that while the why may be off limits, well, the conditions of satisfaction are front and center. In other work cultures, especially ones of high levels of trust, where high levels of trust have been established, the why may also be given little focus. It's not that the why is any less important, but rather that through the trust that has been established, more of the why falls into what's considered obvious. But consider a case where a business unit makes a request of engineering to implement something in a given way. I want the columns in this table to be in this order. The business sees it as being explicit about their request by focusing on the details of how something should be implemented. Engineering can, of course, act upon this, but only by focusing on the why can the best solution be implemented. For example, the business wants the columns in that order so that they can facilitate data import to another tool. But with the real why on the table, here, data exchange, engineering might suggest something else altogether different, such as download to X button instead. In the context of resolving disputes and negotiations, in the book Getting to Yes, authors Fisher and Urey advocate that focusing on why rather than what is often key to overcoming an impasse. They refer to it as the differences between interests, why, and positions, what. In conversations for action, Focusing on why is an essential component of ensuring ultimate satisfaction with the outcome of the result. Being silent on this point significantly reduces the chances of being satisfied with the outcome. So now for a couple final points before we start to limber up for the dancing part of this presentation. Typically, this is done in a live mode, so we're going to have to improvise a little bit here. So first, having conversations for action is no guarantee that you're going to get what you want. Nor are these conversations intended to be static, unchanging, or rigid. They're conversations, plural, and happen dynamically as circumstances and events unfold. The key thing about conversations for action that makes them what they are is that they are not loose or unclear or open to interpretation. The essential component is that both parties in CFA have the same expectations regarding who will do what, by when, and to what level of standards and why. It's also essential to mention that an agreement not to perform, that is, declining a request, is still an agreement. A clear no is more useful than a yes if that yes lacks the commitment to deliver results. Peter Block said that if you cannot say no, then your yes has no meaning. The advantage of a clear no over an ambiguous or uncommitted yes is that the former can be dealt with before it becomes a crisis or breakdown. An ambiguous or uncommitted yes, while appearing to avoid a conflict, actually creates more challenges down the line for all, and it's a phenomenal waste of time, energy, and effort. So now let's see how we can do with the dance moves here. So these dance moves are actually the steps within the conversation for action. And there we go. We start out with our customer and our performer, where the customer makes a request. Keeping it simple, the performer accepts. He or she then performs the agreed upon action and declares that it's complete. During this part here, the person who made the request at any point can cancel or change the request. And at this part here, the person who made the commitment can revoke that commitment if something else changes the circumstances or agreement, like another one of those as soon as possible requests. That's actually the simple case, and we all know that it almost never goes that way. So the way it more often goes, there's the request, and you could accept, but there are other options as well, such as you can decline the request. You can do a commit to commit, which is, for example, can you get me this report by Tuesday? No, I don't think Tuesday will work. Will Thursday work? Yeah, Thursday will work just fine. That's part of the negotiation and is referred to as a commit. Actually, commit to commit is, I don't know if I can get you that by Thursday. Let me check with my team and I'll get back to you by the end of the day. Then offering by Thursday instead, that would actually be the counter offer. And if you make a counter offer, then whoever made the request has all of the same options available to them. So why does any of this matter? It matters because leaders are only effective to the degree to which they can coordinate the actions of others. It matters because requests and agreements are the building blocks of results. It matters because we're building a new skill by looking at a common occurrence of conversation through a new lens. In the practice that follows, in this case, it'll be a video I hope that plays, I want you to listen for all of the moves. Listen for the presence as well as the absence of any of the 5 key components of conversation for action. More importantly, consider whether adding any of your routine missing steps could contribute to greater effectiveness regarding the things that you care about. Okay, let's see if I can get the video here. So this is I'm going to play about a 3-minute video segment that in cartoon form is going to go over how this looks so that you get to see it's not just an academic model, but it happens all of the time. This is just a new way of looking at it.
Hello. Tim and Susan are going to help us demonstrate conversations for action. Susan, would you start us off by making a request?
Tim, would you please do a dance like a chicken?
No, I will not do that. This is stupid.
Believe it or not, we are actually off to a good start. Let's see how we are doing. So here, we had a request. Susan was the customer, and Tim the performer. The request was declined. That's actually an agreement. Susan, would you like to try again?
Tim, in order to make this video useful, would you please dance like a chicken?
Okay. Yeah, I could do that.
So you gave the reason why. It's for the video. You even got what sounded like agreement. So what's missing?
I left off any expectation regarding time frame. Tim, could you do the dance now, please?
You got it. I'll be right back. Okay. I just did the chicken dance.
So this time, you got agreement and Tim did the dance. But Susan, you don't look happy. How come?
It should have been obvious that I wanted to actually see the dance.
I'm only giving you a hard time because you said you wanted to make it a better video. What was obvious to me is that I was going to look silly. So I went off camera first.
So there was no shared background of the obvious. But there are still 2 more parts missing. Tim, you said you performed the request, but you did not ask if it met expectations. And Susan, even though Tim did not ask, you did not tell him you were not satisfied either. An angry grimace does not cut it. Either party can ask, or declare about satisfaction.
And if we really wanted to be clear, the conditions of satisfaction could have been given up front. Try again. I'll be good this time.
Okay. Tim, would you dance like a chicken, right here, right now, and for 2 seconds, so that I can get this exercise right?
Gee whiz. I can't stand dancing.
So Tim, you didn't address the request, but instead made a complaint. Do you actually have a counteroffer or a request of your own?
Yeah. If I am going to dance, could you maybe get some music? If you do that, I think I could do a chicken dance.
Let me check. I'll be back in a few seconds with an answer for you on your counteroffer.
So that was actually a commitment to commit. In this case, to answer the counteroffer within a few seconds.
Okay, I got some music. You actually do a pretty good chicken dance. You have satisfied my request. Thank you.
Don't mention it. I have a whole routine that I do for parties, on weekends.
Clearly, this whole thing was contrived and silly. That's the point. If you use real examples when you practice, it's too easy to get stuck.
So even though the example was silly, it takes practice to make it useful.
We invite you to print the handouts and practice this in your workplace. It's not about hitting every step.
Okay. So typically we do that with an exercise where people actually make requests similar to what was done in that video. This is the compromise because we don't have the ability to dance together. So what? We've gone over conversations for action. Why does it matter? The reason that this matters is because leaders, team members, performers, all of us are only as effective as the agreements that we are able to make and the commitments that we are able to feel, able to perform with each other. In the anatomy of action, remember we've said that we have the things that we care about and we need to produce results. The only way to produce those results is to focus on these steps that are in the middle. What are the actions we need to take? Let's generate the commitments to perform those actions. And the way to do that is to have the relevant conversations. So we really just scratched the surface of this model. It's deceptively simple. What I invite you to do as you are going throughout the rest of your day, having simple requests and conversations, is to have this model in the back of your mind, and you'll see that it is actually taking place in all requests all the time. When you identify, when you're coordinating with other people in a team, that one or more of these critical pieces are missing, that's where you have the ability to spot a breakdown that is in the making, and you can reduce or prevent that breakdown just by calling out the missing step. So my core business is about helping professionals communicate their offers with greater clarity so that they can make more money. I work as a business coach to identify communication gaps within organizations to make you more profitable. Now, business coaches are a dime a dozen, and I believe that the only ones that you should hire are the ones who can show you how to be more profitable. If what we covered here is of value to you, then let's have a conversation. Go to primarygoals.com and you'll see a button where you can schedule a conversation. And I'll stick around for any Q&A if there are. Thank you.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much. That's a really great presentation with a lot of stuff to think about. I actually have a question myself.
Sure.
Anybody else who has a question, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can request to the top right. There's a thing to share your camera if you'd like, and I can bring you on screen here as well. So what would you say are the biggest barriers to getting this implemented? So I think that this is all great, and I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of having everybody aligned in their understanding and having direct conversations and everything. But I'm imagining it doesn't happen overnight if you're trying to kind of make a culture change in your organization. So what are some of the stumbling blocks that people encounter? And maybe if you could talk about that process a little bit, that would be great.
It's actually far easier to implement than you might think. Now, the gap in getting this implemented right now, it's akin to if you saw a presentation or read a book about swimming, that's not going to do squat to help you swim. You need to get in the water. You need to work with someone who actually guide you through the steps to learn the right moves to swim. However, these moves, the conversation for action moves, are happening all the time, whether you pay attention to them or not. Whether you believe in gravity or not, it still holds your feet to the ground. I actually rolled this out within an organization where I was the QA manager. It was the worst performing team in the company when I came on, and they told me, you can fire the whole team if you want. They're that bad. And I introduced this to my team. We started practicing it. We started making and fulfilling our commitments. The respect levels of the team went up. Others started to take notice and said, Ashley, what is it that you're doing? Because this is really working. And HR then had me present the same material to senior managers. Senior managers saw instantly, oh my gosh, this actually explains why we have so many problems. And they started shifting their conversations over the course of the next couple of weeks and months. They started getting better results. And then they eventually had me roll this out to the entire organization. It's not difficult, but it takes practice, which is why typically when I do this in a live presentation, we do this in about 4 hours. The simple, silly games, just like in the video that I played, you really need to play that game. You need to make simple requests like, please pass me a pencil, and see and feel where this goes. One of the more common breakdowns is actually to recognize that there are 4 and only 4 appropriate responses to a request. I'll typically ask organizations, what are the 4 committed responses? And most organizations come up with 3. Yes, no, commitment to commit, and counteroffer. Organizations are often missing at least one. In organizations where they don't see no as an option, the boss gives you this request, you have to do it. If you don't have no as a legitimate option, you have breakdowns in the making. Others don't recognize that they actually have the ability to make a counteroffer because of power differentials. And by not being able to counteroffer and thinking they say yes to everything, it just sets a cascade of conflicts for agreements to be dissatisfied going forward. So understanding that all 4 responses to a request must be on the table in order to have an effective negotiation in order to have a commitment that is trustworthy and reliable, that reduces breakdowns, increases satisfaction.
That's awesome. Is there a lot of overlap, or do you also, one of the things that I see a lot talked about these days is I think it's DISC. Is it DIS? DISC. We actually, somebody a couple EE conferences ago was talking about it. And I'm not sure if I don't know a whole lot about it, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be using this in the right context, but it seems like having tools to identify who on your team is going to be, I mean, like, I know we have people pleasers on our team. And so they're going to feel, especially even if I say, you can say no, they're going to, there's some personality types that are more disposed to just agreeing with everything, or, and also the other way around. So are there like assessments that go along with that as well?
Yeah. So that's a perfect and common example. People pleasers think that the way to please is to say yes. Think it through. Would you rather somebody say yes and then fail to deliver, or that they say no and you know that you can then go to someone else to get this taken care of? Do you want them to just say yes? Or would you be more satisfied if they ask clarifying questions so that what they do actually produces satisfaction to what it is that you request? So if you're really committed to being a people pleaser, then it's actually in your best interest to make sure you know all of these moves. Because I can promise you will please more people more often by making and fulfilling on your agreements than you will by saying yes.
Does anybody else have any questions? I want to remind everybody while we wait and see if there's anybody that wants to come on screen or anything, that I'm going to put a link in here. If you go to eeconf.com/speaker-feedback or eeconf.com/feedback, we'd love to hear your feedback. We will be providing feedback to our wonderful speakers, and feedback only for the conference will only make it better. So we appreciate that. Well, with that, and Ashley, you're welcome to hang out to see if anybody wants to talk if you'd like. But because I think we've got there's a few more minutes before the next session. But I just want to say thank you from everyone. I think this was super informative, and I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Thank you.